later on in the crowd, but it filled up quick, didn't it?
All right, I'll just wait for silence in the room before we can get started. Good afternoon. All right, we want to get started at 5. We want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we want to get this project and this meeting going. So thank you all. Good afternoon. I hope everybody is doing great. I hope everybody had a joyful and restful weekend. For those that don't know me, I am Desiree Fragoso. I am the city administrator, and I've had the pleasure of serving this community for about 8 years now. I'll go ahead and introduce our a group of very intelligent speakers that we have asked to come here today to discuss the upcoming beneficial use project that is slated to begin early next year. We wanted to put this meeting together and give you all an opportunity to gather more information about the project, hear directly from the partners that are included in this endeavor, ask any questions, provide any feedback, and hopefully get through this process as seamless as we can. We definitely depend and rely on your support and help. As you all know, we've been sending a lot of information about this upcoming project to the community and to the Palm Beach property owners. The primary purpose of this beneficial use project is for the Army Corps of Engineers to regain capacity in several of their upland dredge disposals along the Intercoastal Waterway by moving some of the sand there that is beach compatible to both Owl Palms and Sullivan's Island. The city plans to maximize that opportunity by enhancing the scope and using some of that sand to restore the dry sand beach and the dune. And for that portion of the project, we will have Coastal Science and Engineering President Stephen Trainham speak about that. We'll first hear from Jacob Kaiser. He's a project manager with the Army Corps of Engineers. He'll provide an overview of their project, timeline, the purpose, and potential impacts. As I said earlier, we'll hear from Stephen Trainham. He's been with Coastal Science and Engineering for a long time. They've been the city's coastal engineering partner for almost 20 years, 18 years. So knows our beach really well, and the city has benefited from their advice for all this time. He's going to be talking about the city's plans to maximize the sand that's placed by the federally funded portion of the project, which will be the Army Corps, and our plans to enhance the dune, help restore and maintain the beach, and ultimately increase our coastal resiliency by protecting our most important infrastructure, which, as we all know, is the beach. Last but not least, we will hear from Matt McQuillan, who is right in the middle of our panel. He is the city's attorney, and we will talk about the need for the city to secure temporary easements from all of the Palm Beach property owners. So we'll go through a little bit of that, and then at the end, we will take any questions. So if you all don't mind, we want to go through the 3 presentations and then get questions from the audience. I also want to let you all know we have a handful of folks that are joining us remotely via Zoom. So we are recording this meeting, and this meeting will be posted and available starting tomorrow on the city's website. If anybody is interested in getting a direct link, let us know, and we will share that with you all by email. All right, thank you all for coming, and I'm excited. All right, Jacob, do you want to go first?
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Beautiful place for a meeting out here. Love the view. Like Desiree said, my name is Jacob Kaiser. I'm a project manager with the Corps of Engineers in Charleston. I handle a lot of our navigation projects. The Intercoastal Waterway is one of the projects that that falls under my duties, as well as Charleston Harbor. And we are excited to talk to you here about a beneficial use opportunity that we're trying to take some material that we would normally just put in a placement area and get to go to waste, and instead we're going to try to put it on the beach this go around. So just to give you a little bit of background about the Intercoastal Waterway and just kind of how we're leading into this project opportunity that we're about to undertake. The Intercoastal Waterway is a federal project that was constructed and maintained by the Corps of Engineers. Is authorized in its current dimensions in 1937, so it's pretty old. In South Carolina, it's about 235 miles of intercoastal waterway from Georgia all the way up to the North Carolina border. And the Charleston District maintains about 212 miles of that, with our sister districts in Savannah and Wilmington handling the two bookends on either end. It's 12 foot wide, 12 foot deep and 90 feet wide along that length. And we perform periodic maintenance dredging to try to maintain those dimensions as funding allows. And then the Breach Inlet Shoal, which is in the intercoastal waterway, not in the inlet, so beyond, behind us here, is one of the shoals that we regularly dredge when we have funding to do so. This is a bit of overview. I know this is kind of small, but typically, so our Breach Inlet Shoal that we would typically dredge under our dredging projects is this orange highlighted area of the intercoastal waterway. And typically that is dredged with a cutter suction dredge and turns the material into like a hydraulic slurry, and that is pumped into these placement areas that you may see when you go over the Isle of Palms connector, several islands along the waterway there. And typically, under our federal standards, that's the cheapest option, and is how the Corps has done business for years and years. You find the cheapest way to dispose of the material and keep the navigation open for the boating traffic. But regulations have now changed to allow us to look at more beneficial use opportunities. And so the federal standard now lets us consider the cost of environmental improvements and things of that nature when looking at the cost of that. And so instead of just putting the material in these placement areas, locked up, not to be used again, we're going to try to take the material out of those placement areas and put it on the beach. So this is kind of an overview, inside of one of the placement areas. I'm not sure exactly which one this is, but it's a photo taken right after a dredging event. You can see this beach quality sand has been placed in one of these upland placement areas. And so the primary purpose of what we're doing here is to try to regain capacity within those placement areas by removing that material and putting it on the beach. So we have estimated about 500,000 cubic yards of sand placed on the beach. So for reference, a cubic yard is about the size of a washing machine. So 500,000 cubic yards, 500,000 washing machines of sand basically is the amount that we'd be putting on the beaches. And so we've identified 3 placement zones, roughly from 3rd Avenue up to 10th on Isle of Palms, 3 separate placement zones where that material is going to be dredged out of those placement areas along the intercoastal waterway and put onto the beaches. This project will be placing all of the material below the mean high water line, so it's basically the intertidal zone between high tide and low tide. We're doing that for a few reasons, mostly for cost savings, to reduce this amount of beach heavy equipment footprint that we would have on our project, and try to get the sand here as economically as possible. There will be limited heavy equipment, like I said, and lighting on the beach. It'll be a 24/7 operation. We expect about 4-month construction period on Isle of Palms, with construction beginning sometime between January and June of 2024, or within that period. And we also have a placement within the same contract at Sullivan's Island that's about 2 months of that construction period. So we're intending to get started on our current schedule late January. This is just a larger overview of the placement zones. Like I said, 3rd Avenue is right here. The placement zone a little bit further south of there to Breach Inlet, all the way up to 10th. And like I said, our current schedule is to try to award the contract late December, so probably the week after Christmas timeframe, which would allow us to get a contractor potentially started in late January. I'm sorry, I forgot to delete that, but that was we expect about a 4-month period of placement on IOP and about 1 to 2 months at Sullivan's Island. And this is just kind of the questions section. I think we're going to defer questions till the end, but anyway, we're really excited to have the opportunity to do this from the Corps of Engineers standpoint. We all live and work in the area, enjoy the beaches here, and looking for an opportunity to beneficially use this material and try to do something beneficial for the community. So, thank you.
All right, there we go. All right, well, thanks. Again, my name is Stephen Trainum. I'm president of Coastal Science and Engineering, and as Desiree said, we've been working with the city of Isle of Palm since about 2007, just before the first large-scale nourishment project was completed in 2008 at the east end of the island. I don't have a ton of slides, but our role here is to kind of help the city, kind of as a third party, look at what the Corps is doing, and then really we saw that when the Corps, we've kind of been talking about this project for a couple of years. They identified this breach inlet area as one of their principal goals for beneficial use projects. It's kind of the first, let's say the first time, but it's one of the first projects in the state looking at how do we manage, beach systems in a way where we're maximizing the benefit of sand and trying to really keep sand in the system. So when they approached us several months ago to discuss, this project, we were fully on board with, let's get as much sand as possible on the beach. I know as y'all drive over the connector, after they fill up one of these spoil islands, you look down and you see this beautiful white sand, like whiten that out on the beach. Well, that's what's hopefully going to be happening here very soon, is moving that sand back out to the beach. But due to some of the limitations that Jacob was mentioning with the way that they have to place the material in essentially a cost-effective manner to make their cost-benefit analysis work out, and also looking at the sediment texture from these islands, it requires the material to be placed kind of out almost into the water a little bit. So it's going to look a little different than some of the typical beach nourishment projects that if you've seen at the east end of the island or on other beaches where they're using bulldozers to build sand up into a berm and maybe pushing up a dune. That's not going to happen with the Corps' effort, but looking at especially recent events that some erosion issues we've had around Breach Inlet, we knew we wanted to be able to try to get the dune restored and in any area we can get a dry sand beach built fairly quickly, trying to work with nature in the way that the waves are going to move sand around. So we've talked to the city about supplementing work associated with this project to kind of to do some things that the Corps can't do with their effort. They're going to be responsible for placing 500,000 yards, give or take, of sand into the system. What we're going to try to do is take some of that material and then look at the conditions at the time of construction and have selective restoration of that dune and dry beach system anywhere along this project area where it's needed at the time of construction. And to put this into context a little bit, 500,000 yards, if you were to go out and contract a dredge to come pump that material from offshore, you're looking at about a $10 million project. So in the grand scheme of things, the city of Isle of Palms is getting about a $10 million project quantity of sand for free, thanks to what the Corps is doing. So that's kind of the big picture we always need to kind of keep in the back of our mind. But what we're looking at doing by supplementing some of this material is taking the sand that they're pushing out into the intertidal beach area and then moving that up into the dune immediately. what this is going to look like when they're placing the material is, as Jacob said, it's a hydraulic fill, meaning there's a slurry of sand and water that's going to be pumped from a pipe out into the intertidal beach area, meaning about mid-tide level and even at low tide level, the pipe might actually be out in the water, and that's going to allow the sand mixture to kind of get into the water, mix around, and any silt or really fine material, if there is any mud in this area, which there's likely to be a little bit, will have some time to wash out. And that's what we want to happen. We want, nice clean sand that's actually moving up the beach. By nourishing that intertidal area, you're adding sand to your sandbox. As our founder always liked to talk about the sandbox, you're increasing your quantity. Over time, waves will naturally move that sand up the beach profile and restore the dry sand beach even if we didn't touch it. Eventually, that dry sand beach would feed a dune and you'd have dune recovery as well, but we're going to try to accelerate that process, especially in the most vulnerable areas right now. So that's really what we're looking to do. Right now, I don't have a firm estimate on what quantity that's going to require because we are going to look at it as the project's going along. So what I envision occurring or happening is that the placement will start with the Corps, and we'll let them pump sand for maybe a month, maybe a little bit more to get a volume out into the system so that they can kind of have room to move out of an area. We can see how that sand is sorting itself out, how quickly it's moving up the beach face, how quickly it's starting to shift south, because we know as soon as you start placing sand out there, it's going to start moving. So we're going to track that as it's being placed from day one. And once there's a sufficient quantity that it makes sense to bring in either the same contractor or a separate contractor, the city's contract portion would take the material from the intertidal beach and basically harvest the sand and move it up to the dune via truck. And I can show some photos of that. But to kind of set the stage of what the system looks like right now, we've had a lot of erosion over Breach Inlet since about mid-year, since maybe May of this year. The Breach Inlet system's been eroding very heavily, and we're out there right now doing some emergency scraping work and some sandbag work, really just trying to hold the line so we're not getting additional upland loss of area and impacting people's properties. Their pools and porches and things are getting very close. So we've been shifting some sand around, but really we're just in a cyclic portion or cyclic cycle. That's repetitive, but in a cycle of erosion that's influenced by the Breach Inlet system itself. And this is just a record of about 10 years worth of volume. If we kind of assemble all the sand volume along the Breach Inlet area, you can see how it fluctuates back and forth between accretion and erosion, and I'll show you why that happens in a second, but it's a highly dynamic area. Anywhere near an inlet is. That's why we've had problems at the east end as well. I've got a couple of models, and I'll show a video here in a second that kind of highlights what's going on, but we survey this area every year for the city, and what we're looking at is the position of the Breach Inlet channel, where the main channel exits the delta. So the yellower sands here, that's your higher shoals, the deeper blues, that's the deeper channels. So oftentimes there's a channel that hugs Sullivan's Island, and then periodically a new channel will breach through the delta, and it's a pattern that goes over and over again. And if you track it from, this is a period of 3 years, and I'll just kind of flip through that a couple of times. So 21, 22, and 23, you see a shift, you see a collapse of the original channel that was up against Sullivan's Island. You see westward and southerly migration of the main channel, and you see a lot of sand being pulled off of the Breach Inlet shoreline and out into the delta. And this is kind of another view of that from the same thing. You see a new channel open up here in 21 compared to 2019. There's a new channel, and then that channel is already starting to migrate again. And there's a really neat website called Google Earth Engine that shows this process happening. So this is a loop since 1984, and you can kind of get lost watching this for a while. But it goes from 1984 now to 2022, and you can see just this kind of river of sand that goes from Isle of Palms through the delta and migrates onto Sullivan's Island. You can see the maritime forest being built out on Sullivan's Island, If you look really closely, you can see some channels kind of forming and migrating immediately adjacent to the Isle of Palm shoreline. You see new main channels opening up in the delta. So it's a occurrence that's been going on for hundreds of years, as long as that system's been in place. So that's what we're trying to work with, is this just ever-changing cycle of sand migration there. Not too much more here. So what will it look like? I'm not sure if you've been out there recently to see some of the work that's been done, but essentially we would be going out with a excavator or possibly scraping pans, digging sand from the low tide beach area, putting it in a truck, and hauling it up to the dune to rebuild a dune and then rebuild a dry sand beach. So this would be happening outside of the footprint where the nourishment contractor will be. They will probably be outside of the area so that we're not interfering with each other. So there will be some impacts to access. We don't want people running through the path where the trucks are going to be. Essentially every tide, these holes fill in. As the tide comes in, they fill in so your beach is less smooth after that. This is actually photos from the East End project where we did very similar type work, harvesting. We moved about 200,000 yards of sand in that case. I'm assuming we're going to move somewhere around 50,000 cubic yards of sand. It may be more or less depending on what the conditions actually look like. All of this work will be 100% financially due from the city of Isle of Palm, so this is not part of the core scope. It's a completely kind of separate project. So we will solicit bids from contractors once their project is out for bid. Probably right after bids are received, we would solicit bids from contractors for this. I'm assuming this will probably take about a month to a month and a half of work to do a full-scale project if the conditions kind of maximize what I think might be possible. As I mentioned before, as the Corps is placing all this material in the active beach system, a lot of it's going to immediately start moving to the south. So we're going to track that, and that'll really help guide us on what quantity and what level of effort we really need to do. And I think that's all I have on what this might look like, and we'll be happy to entertain questions after back here.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, as Desiree mentioned, I'm Mac McQuillan. I'm the city attorney for Isle of Palms, and I've been designated to talk about the exciting topic of easements. I don't have any videos or cool beach pictures, but I only have 360 slides. No, I'm just kidding. I got a short number of slides. So as it says in the title, the easements are required. The question is, why do we need easements for this project? We don't need it for the Army Corps project, which we want to be clear, that's a separate project. The reason we need it, though, is for the city's portion of it that Stephen just talked about. We'll be scraping and placing some sand to re-nourish the dunes. This is somewhat hard to see, but here's some of the houses near Breach Inlet now, and you can see this is all public land here. Then we've got both of OCRM's line, the baseline and the setback line. That's within OCRM's jurisdiction. Beyond that, that's private property. And so because we're placing sand on owners' private property, we need an agreement to allow us to enter your property to do that. And so that's the reason an easement is necessary. One of the big questions is, are we having a temporary easement or a permanent easement? If this was a straight up Army Corps project, it would be required to be a permanent easement. They don't mess around with temporary easements. Ultimately, our goal is to try to have permanent easements in place, but for purposes of this project, we are doing a temporary 2-year easement. And that's this slide here. Is we're doing this so that we can act quickly, but ultimately a permanent easement would be beneficial to owners, because if there is an emergency situation or if the city comes up with an ongoing maintenance plan, we won't have to come to you and get you to sign the agreements. And you'll see as we kind of explain it, there are some quirky signature requirements, et cetera. So let's get into a little bit of the explanation of the term. So First, we're not reinventing the wheel here. These easements are pretty standard. The language in our easements tracks with the easements the Army Corps normally uses and other municipalities in the area. There's not a whole lot of difference from what is regularly used. When you get the easements, and this is important because we've done a round of these easements at Breach Inlet now, and probably 4 or 5 of the 20 or 30 that we've gotten weren't executed properly. So it's got to be signed by the property owners. You got to have 2 separate witnesses and a notary public with a notary seal, and the city needs the original. The reason for that is these are recorded with the RMC's office of the Register of Deeds in Charleston County, and they won't let us record it unless those requirements are on there. So the next few slides are common questions we got from the first round that we did these. So first, is an easement an encumbrance on your property? Yes, it is. But most residential properties have easements and have encumbrances like this. The most common are utility easements, access easements, and the like. In our view, this is a lot like a utility easement. It's an easement, it is an encumbrance, but it benefits your property by providing protection from storms and preventing erosion. All right, does it affect title to the property? Yes, it does. Now, this is a temporary easement, so it will be for 2 years. But again, it's a lot like a utility easement, running electricity, water to your home. We don't believe, in our view, that it'll have any impact on market value. In fact, there's a chance that it will increase your value because it's providing protection from erosion. All right, can a property owner use the property subject to the easement? Yes, you can. Now, you can't go and tear the dune down that we just built and put a pool on it, but you are still able to use the property as you ordinarily would be able to. In the easement, it specifically talks about construction of dune overwalk subject to any local or federal regulations, but you're still allowed to utilize the property located in the easement area. All right, the easement does have release and indemnity language, and we got a lot of questions about this. So the indemnity language, since the city isn't performing the work, it's its contractors that are performing the work. The city doesn't want to be held liable for property damage claims or personal injury claims. And the key word here is which were not caused by the city. So if the city causes it, that's on us. But if we don't cause it, this agreement protects the city. The easement also has a release. While we're doing our best to prevent erosion and restore the dunes, we can't guarantee it. We don't know if a big name storm will come next year. And so I'll give you some examples just on the indemnity front. So let's say you have a house on Front Beach, you rent it out. The renter gets upset because they don't have access right behind their house because they're doing scraping for the week that they're here and building the dune, and they can't lay out right in front of the beach house they just rented. If they sue the city, you need to turn that over to your homeowner's insurance. That's not on the city. Second example is one of your guests has a bunch of beers and gets intoxicated and is just running around crazy on the beach and runs into a parked excavator, and the city gets sued. Again, the easement protects us. That's not on us. One of the most common questions we had is, does the easement affect title to any property that may accrete? And so accretion is just the gaining of land. We talked about the Sullivan's Island Maritime Forest. It's gotten bigger and grown over time. The answer is no, and the easement specifically says that it does not affect ownership rights to any property located seaward of the lots encumbered by the easement. And so this isn't a land grab by the city. We're not trying to get you to sign this and be like, oh, now that's now public land. That's ultimately up to the state. You can claim ownership of that if it accretes. The state may disagree under the public trust doctrine, which is a whole other topic, but the easement in particular won't affect your ownership rights, and we've made that clear in the easement. The good news is we've already sort of been through this, with a bunch of the property owners located right near Breach Inlet. They've hired lawyers, reviewed it, given us feedback. We've revised it, we've tweaked it. We think we've got a very good document now. And it's been approved, and the vast, I think all but maybe 1 or 2 folks signed it. On that point, if you don't sign it, you don't get the scraping in front of your house. We can't go on your property without you signing a 2-year easement to allow us to do that. And with that said, I will now open the floor to questions for any of the folks. Before I do that, I want to thank Desiree and Douglas and City Council for putting this together too. This is a good, very informative thing that you did, and I appreciate you doing it.
Are there any questions? And if so, raise your hand and I will walk in and give you the mic. Or maybe meet me halfway. State your name and your
right.
are inclined to do so.
All right, Corey Hillis, 900 Ocean Boulevard. We haven't been here so many years that we went through this before, so none of you guys really know what you're doing. But in Ocean City, Maryland, I'm from Maryland originally, and I'm getting over a cold from a long time ago. I can take that. In Ocean City, they've been doing this pumping sand on the beach for a long time, and they've made the beach real high, and then a steep slope goes down into the ocean. And it's the most dangerous place. I won't even have my kid play up there anymore in the water because it's gotten so crazy. So I just wanted to put that feeler out to make sure that's like something that somebody might keep an eye on over time. And I know they pump it every year because it's a big vacation beach up there. But I'd hate to see something like that happen here because it would ruin my surfing, which would be a real bummer for me. But more important, I just want it to be a safe beach. That's really gotten really screwy. I was in Hawaii. There's a section called Sandy Beach up there, and as the lifeguard, same thing. The waves are breaking right on the sand. Right? The wave sucks up, and then the next wave breaks literally on sand. And if you're like trying to surf and you do it wrong, you're just breaking your neck. And I asked the lifeguard, I'm like, this is a dangerous looking beach, and he said, yeah, 95%, almost 100% of like neck injuries and whatnot in all of Hawaii happen right on this like one area. So just wanted to put that out there, like something that maybe somebody is making sure we don't, kind of wreck the beach up that way.
Thanks for your question. It's a very good question. What generally happens, and I imagine this is the case in Maryland, is the beach slope is a function of two things. It's the grain size and the wave climate. So if you pump a coarser material onto a beach, often you can steepen the slope of it. And sometimes that's temporary. It might last for several months, and sometimes it's permanent. Edisto Beach, for example, in South Carolina is a much coarser beach, and you have that very similar, much steeper beach face, and I've seen waves actually reflecting off the beach there. The material that's going to be placed here is a much finer material. It's very close to what's on the beach or even a little finer. So I'm not anticipating any kind of steepness factor. As I mentioned earlier, that when they're initially placing it, and Doug has kind of brought this question up, what's the beach going to look like immediately, and then how's that going to change over time? It's kind of uncertain to say right now, but I think you're going to end up with a much wider kind of intertidal beach for a couple of weeks to months. So at low tide, there's going to be a lot more sand visible on a big spring low tide. But over a period of weeks to months, it's going to return to a much more natural profile. And a lot of that sand is going to move up the beach into the dry sand system.
He didn't ask this, but is it going to make the waves better?
I saw I'm sorry. Are you going to answer the wave question?
Come on, yeah, that's a serious question.
I think it depends on if you're a short boarder or a long boarder.
Yeah, you can answer that.
Yeah, if you're a coastal engineer, you don't like any waves. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact, but there will be some changes to the surf break in the immediate area for a temporary amount of time. And you may have a good break. Depending on how they place it, there may be some kind of mounds where you get a longer break between the two placement sections. So it'll be something to watch, but it'll be temporary.
I think it's a hand here. Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you.
Gary Wolf, 408 Ocean. Just to be clear, because I'm not certain, the addresses that will benefit from this, everyone's going to benefit, but the specific addresses that you anticipate are going to receive dune renourishment. I know you mentioned where you're putting the sand, but from where to where is going to receive each nourishment, and then from where to where are the easements needed, because not all are going to be encroaching, I assume, on property.
So the dune project will be based off the conditions at the time, right?
Just for example.
For example, today, I didn't go north of 4th Avenue today when I was out there, but the area essentially south of 3rd, is critically eroded. There's an escarpment. So anywhere that has an escarpment visible, we would plan on placing some sand. Or if there was kind of a very small escarpment, but there really wasn't much dry sand beach at the time. And again, I'm kind of projecting to February, March condition, what it might look like. We would try to supplement that dune, pending, approval from the city that they're willing to spend the amount of money required to kind of address the site, the entire area, or focus on the most critical areas. But I can't tell you today what that would look like, but as our engineering opinion with easements, and we've dealt with a lot of core projects with easements and things like, my recommendation, just if I owned a house that, the core of the city had the opportunity and the, wisdom and ability to kind of say, hey, we'll put sand in front of your house. I'd want that easement as close to my house as possible, thinking that next year we may have a Hugo, we may have an incredibly bad storm, that you don't want to spend a month trying to obtain an easement, record it, when they could have equipment out there the day after the storm pushing sand back up into that area. So whether it's this project or a potential future project, it's something we would strongly recommend, just as a tool that the city has in hand to be able to help the property owners in those circumstances.
So 4th Street down is what's been improved to date. You didn't say that you're gonna improve, I thought that this part of this project was to improve a much larger area.
Yes, we are securing easements from 4th to 10th. The placement area for the core is between 2nd and 10th Avenue, but the plan would be for us to maximize and utilize that sand from Breach Inlet to 10th Avenue based on current conditions at the time. It's going to depend on the volume in those different reaches.
And what was the split between the 500,000 cubic yards? Was that all IOP, or I thought you said some of that was Sullivan's?
So the 500,000 cubic yards I referenced is all for Isle of Palms. The total project is just a hair under 700, so there's about 175,000 cubic yards going to Sullivan's Island.
I saw a hand earlier here. I'm keeping note of all the hands being raised. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Susan Player, and our family has 406 Ocean Boulevard. And with the project that seems to be ongoing already at this moment from Breach Inlet right here coming up to not quite 4th Avenue, we've seen the scrapers going out front, scooping up land from our low tide, in front of our house, and then trucking it down, or further down the beach to make that berm. And I want them to do well and survive, but it makes me uncomfortable to think, where are we going to get nourishment from? I mean, we're definitely at risk at this time. And where is it going to be scraped? Are they going to go up to 8th Avenue and scrape and then bring it down to us? How is this going to work in the long term? Because of course right now, we don't want to lose that sand out in front of us, but we want our neighbors to be okay. And I do have another question, so I don't know if you want me to ask that now.
Go ahead and ask them.
I just wanted to confirm, and I think you told us that the easement is going to be specifically right up at the dune level and not an easement across our property where they can bring machinery or such coming in from Ocean Boulevard across our property. And those are my two questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Steve, you want to take the first one?
Sure.
We'll take the second one.
To your first question, I know there was a couple of days when this scraping project was kind of first getting going where they did take sand from a little further north and then bring it south, and we told them not to do that anymore. So that shouldn't have been happening anytime really within the past month. For this project with the core, that 400 block will be within the placement limits of the core's project. So there will be nourishment occurring directly in front of your property. And then we would look at how the beach is evolving to determine, most of the material is going to be going from, mostly seaward to the landward. We're not anticipating hauling from one end to another, but logistics may dictate some of that, just to be able to work around crews and take advantage of, if they've placed more material out. But we're going to try to do it in a way that's very equitable to all properties so that we're not, robbing Peter to pay Paul and that type of thing.
To answer your question on the easement, it's not going to be an access easement. It's really an easement just to where we're placing the sand in that area. They'll use the public access to get their vehicles and equipment out on the beach.
I saw a hand here. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Wendy Pastrick, 600 Ocean Boulevard. You showed a graph that showed how the beach kind of comes and goes, and I get that we've been down here 5 years. My question is, how does dredging for boaters on Breach Inlet impact that variability? And will there continue to be plans to dredge for boaters? And if so, would we always now keep the sand that's being dredged on the beach side and not be taking it to the other side?
Then it steps in.
Yeah, you can get your workout.
Regarding our dredging of the intercoastal waterway, in recent history, we've been very limited in the amount of funding that Congress allocates for us to do dredging. In recent years, that's picked up a bit, so we've started to see more and more funding to where we think we're going to, at least for the time being, we're at the whims of Congress, but for the time being, we feel like we can continue to get back onto a cycle of cyclical dredging of the intercoastal waterway. Typically, the sand that deposits in the Breach Inlet shoal on the waterway is coming off the beaches through the inlet, and it just, after we dredge, it starts filling in again over a period of time. So this project that I described today, where we're removing material from these upland placement areas, that's a one-time project to get that sand out of those areas so that we can basically have the capacity to put material in there in the future if we need to. But our desire is that we would, in future dredging events, be able to just directly place the sand from the intercoastal waterway directly onto IOP and Sullivan's, at least the beach quality portion of that.
My name is Jeff Jacobs. My wife and I live at 606 Ocean. My steps are currently at 710 Ocean. If anyone wants to visit them. I have 3 questions, and it's relating to beneficial nourishment. I think everyone agrees that when we lose dunes, it doesn't vanish, it just goes down to the low water mark. So why not just allow scraping like you did and just put the dunes back? It's a lot less expensive than dredging. That's question number 1. You can work on that one while I'm thinking. Oh, and the other one was related, was everyone agrees that all the sand from Isle of Palms is now in Breach Inlet. Why not open the inlet and take that sand, which is close by, and put it right back where it came from? And the third one was, how do you physically move the sand from your catchment area over? You're not going to go over and push it around in pipes over to Breach Inlet and then move it from there?
Yeah. So just to clarify, the primary purpose of our project as the Army Corps is an operational and maintenance project for the intercoastal waterway. So for navigation purposes, to support our dredging program, we continually dredge this material, and the portion that's going on the beach is just a beneficial use. So instead of that material going elsewhere, we're trying to put it somewhere where the community can benefit from it. And so I'm maybe defer to Stephen on the dune morphology, I guess is the right word, on how that moves around. But our primary project is to support navigation of the intercoastal waterway. And we just found that we have this beach quality sand that we'd like to put somewhere where the community gets a benefit out of it.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things. As far as like volume change on the beach, that area between basically south of the pier historically has been pretty stable or gaining sand, but over the past 5 to 10 years has shown a net loss. So sand is coming and going, but overall it's losing sand every year if you average it out. In the past couple of years, it's actually lost a couple of 100,000 yards of sand. And that material is, some of it's going into Breach Inlet, eventually some of that's going over to Sullivan's Island. Some of it may end up even further offshore and kind of gets outside of the beach system. So this project, if we were proposing a beach nourishment project, then we approach it with a different calculus on, well, what's the best cost-effective way to move sand? But since the Corps is coming to us saying, here's 500,000 yards of free sand, that it changes, you know, how you design it. Forgetting where I'm going with that.
Yeah. So it's apples and oranges, like two
Right.
different projects. But the question remains, after a major storm, the dune is right at the low
So-
tide mark, and it's right there
Yeah.
to grab and push back.
So after a major storm, beach scraping is a tool that can be effective in certain situations. After a storm is the ideal situation for scraping, because you're exactly right. A storm flattens out a beach profile, so it takes it from the dune and usually builds a low tide bar, an underwater bar, and scraping just kind of accelerates the natural beach recovery and pushes that sand higher up. But like, for instance, what's going on at Breach Inlet right now is it's not a storm response erosion. It's more kind of a chronic long-term erosion, you know, that's associated with changes to the inlet. So you can scrape every day and that sand just immediately is going away again. So we're really trying to add sand to the system with this project. And there's another benefit to the Corps with this is they're removing beach compatible material to make space for material that's not beach compatible. So the goal is in future projects when they're dredging the inlet, and tell me if I'm wrong here, as they're dredging the waterway, any beach compatible material will go directly to the beach system and not go to the spoil area first, deposition basin, excuse me. And then any non-beach compatible material can go in those basins. So really they're making room for future material that isn't able to be put on the beach and taking advantage of the beach compatible material that's there now.
Is there any disadvantage to scraping the sand back after a storm?
Not really. I mean, especially if there's properties threatened that can provide some very short-term or very immediate storm protection from, you know, future tides, you know, that may occur until the beach naturally recovers. But for chronic erosion, where it's, you know, you're just constantly losing sand over time, it's not a long-term strategy.
All right, I have Dudley, and then a gentleman in the back. Oh, no. It's you.
Dudley Spangler, live on Ocean Boulevard. Have several friends that live down in the 100 block. You said that the project runs from 2nd Avenue up. What about the folks that are in the 100 block of Ocean down to Breach Inlet? Is this going to include them? And then secondly, the coastal engineering part of the project, which is, as I remember you said, 50,000 yards, give or take. That will be funded by the city. And my question then would be to Desiree and Douglas, is there any grant money that will get that back from us, or is that going to come strictly out of our contingency fund for beach renovation?
Want to take the first portion, Stephen?
Sure. So yes, the city's portion of the project will include all properties that have a eroded condition at the time. So if that extends down into the 100 block, then we will continue to do, we're going to be continuing to work in that area up until this project starts, and hopefully by that time the condition is naturally, you know, at least gotten somewhat better. But we're not going to leave anybody out of having a dune after this project's put in place.
And on the second question, Dudley, the city obviously has some beach renourishment funds available. Our plan would be to request a grant from the state that would cover at least half of the construction costs. A lot of the work that has been happening after the storm, Idalia, hit us in October, is now eligible for reimbursement from FEMA. at the 75%, 25% cost share, not all, but some of it, which will allow us the opportunity to get some money from the state that was originally being allocated for the original trucking project. That now our plan would be get coverage from FEMA for that portion and be able to tap in some of those state funds to cover some, at least half of the cost of this additional scope for the core project.
Okay, great.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you. Going back to what we can expect possibly from Breach Inlet, at 406 Ocean, we purchased 35 years ago the lot, and we built 30 years ago. And in the time since 1993, we've watched an accretion over the first approximately 22, 23 years. And it you know, every year Breach has a little of this. But overall, we had a good, I'd say over 10 yards over those first 22, 23 years. And it was consistently building up, which is both good and bad in different ways. And the last perhaps 6 to 7 years has been when we've really seen it just consistently chop back towards us every year. My question as a result is, do we think that Breach Inlet is going to continue to pull at the level? You know, it just obviously seems to be just pulling in this material and this sand and, you know, putting us all at risk. Do we have any idea, are we trusting this to Mother Nature, or do we have indications of whether that might continue at the same rate, at a more alarming rate, or do we have any kind of answers on that, or ideas? Projections?
It goes back.
Thank you for the question. You're exactly right on what you've observed. That, you know, the past 7 to 10 years has been a highly erosional time period, really for the entire state. Our company works for most of the developed beaches in the state. We survey every single one of them for the state, and we've seen, you know, high erosion, or, you know, greater than typical erosion in a lot of different areas. A lot of areas that have never had erosion before. You look at the central part of Litchfield Beach, other places in the Grand Strand, and even further south. Areas are being more impacted than they have been. And I could go through the list of storms we've had since Hurricane Joaquin in 2015. So we've been getting, you know, hit a lot by storm events as well. So I think that's had a lot to do with it. We try not to be the doomsday sea level rise folks, but we have been tracking sea level rise. In the past 10 years, we have seen a uptick in the rate. So, you know, generally sea level rise isn't your principal cause of erosion, but it certainly could be adding to what we've seen recently. So I can't tell you that it is cyclical. There will be times where it does start to come back. But if you look at the long-term trends, you know, it's up and down, and is that up and down, you know, over time averaging up or averaging down? For the past 10 years, it's been averaging down. And so we're looking at the long-term strategy. We're looking at, before we even knew about this core project, we were planning on including the entire area south of the pier as a potential nourishment site using offshore sand, just like the East End. And so we're actually going to be working on a permit and identifying other sand sources. You know, should this project be a one-off, that the next time we're facing, you know, critical erosion, we'll have a plan and funding set aside for restoring that area.
Just to follow up, it sounds as though Breach Inlet is not necessarily targeted as the issue. It's just a piece of the issue, perhaps. Not having been involved in any scientific studies, to me, it just looks like Breach Inlet is just pulling and pulling and pulling from the islands. So I just want to understand from you that it's not really particular to that, or that's just one aspect. It's not the main aspect, perhaps.
It could be one of several, and I can't tell you, you know, percentage-wise. It's changes associated with the inlet, and that can be small scale with channels that hug the beach, to large scale looking at arcs of the shoreline as you really zoom out over a several mile area. sediment supply from up coast, looking at even long-term weather patterns, if we're getting more winds out of the northeast, things like that. Every single one of those can play a factor into it. Sometimes it's really easy to pinpoint what those are when you, especially right around 400 block, you're in the transition zone between majority inlet effects and sediment inputs from up coast. So it's, you know, a dynamic ocean.
All right. 2 more questions before we wrap up. Teresa, you're gonna be next.
Hi, Bill Skeen, 620 Ocean. 2 questions I have. One is, will the beach be totally closed during this 4-month period of time that they're going to be going through this project? And the second question is there anything we can proactively do on the part of the dunes, the top of the dunes, either plant dune plants or sand fences, or is there anything that will keep that part of the dune eroding away? And is there anything we can do proactively on that?
Great question.
I'll speak to the first part. So for the first part of your question about beach closures, typically there will be the entire beach will remain open. I don't know if you've ever seen a beach renourishment at all, but it's typically, it moves very quickly for the most part. And the closed area will only be the contractor's immediate work area, which is typically somewhere between 500 to 1,000 feet. And they typically will just put like the orange kind of construction snow fencing around that area. And since we're going to be in the intertidal zone for the most part, I would expect that you would have no impacts really on the dry sand beach.
And for the other part with potential steps you can do for the dune right now, I would suggest holding off until the spring or until our work is at least very well defined on what we're going to do. And then we are going to recommend to the city, and I've already talked about putting in sand fencing and vegetation along the entire project area in a consistent manner that, you know, will look good, will help kind of facilitate natural dune growth and keep people off of the dune.
All right. Last question, Teresa. Make it good.
I'm Teresa Michael. I live at 120 Ocean Boulevard. And does anybody want to buy an oceanfront property? I'm not for sale. But my question is to the Army Corps of Engineers over there. Is it, I keep hearing from a sundry of people that this could have to do with the dredging that was done in Wild Dunes in 18, I believe it was, and that it's wreaked havoc on us because of all the dredging done there. I would just like to hear you tell me that that's not at all the case, that that had nothing to do with what we're experiencing now.
That's for you, bro.
And then I need it,
Oh, what do you?
and then the second question is for Mr. McQuillan?
Yes, ma'am.
McQuillan? I can't see that far. So if this is in reference to the setback, or not the setback, but the easement. And so right now they're putting sand on my property, which I'm very grateful for and all their efforts. But eventually I would like to have my yard back. I had a putting green and a fountain and whatever. And right now it's dunes there. Like I said, I'm very grateful for that. But will I be able to eventually get my property back for my purpose, for my use? Once the dunes are nourished adequately.
Thank you, Teresa. Stephen, do you want to take the first question?
I don't think so.
No?
Yeah, I think that was for the court.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize, I can't give you a definitive answer because the Wild Dunes project wouldn't have been an Army Corps project. And Breach Inlet, the dynamics of that inlet are just not something that we study or have the data on. So we're focused on the intercoastal waterway, which is influenced by that inlet. But the dynamics of the inlet with surveying and changes there, it's not a federal project, so it's not something that is under our purview for the most part. So I'd have to defer to Stephen on exactly how the inlet has moved and changed over time.
Would you like my thoughts on it? Okay. The 2018 project, added sand to the northeast end of the island, and we're able to track that sand as it's migrating down the beach. That project didn't affect the wave climate. It didn't affect the currents that are, moving sand along the front beach of Isle of Palms. It's supplying a source of sand that you can see the growth of sand along like 53rd Avenue, the Citadel House, all the way down really to, we're able to track it about to the pier, and then the signal kind of starts to fade out as time and distance, sand starts to spread out. But that is not having a negative impact on the breach inlet system, because if anything, it's helping by providing a source of sand that's feeding that system over time from the upcoast area. Again, like that animation showing that it's a highly dynamic area, and you can look up and down South Carolina to see how anywhere near an inlet is going to change a lot. Sometimes you're going to get a lot of growth, sometimes you're going to get a lot of erosion. And trying to pinpoint, one project to the next, when you're looking at 6 miles of distance between the two, really there's no link that can be made between adding sand to that part and the amount of erosion that we're seeing there at Breach Inlet. And then Maggie.
Yeah, so with respect to if your land accretes, can you reclaim it? Under our easement, the city's fine with that, but it's really sort of outside of our jurisdiction. That's really OCRM's jurisdiction. And every couple years, is it 5 or 10 years? But yeah, every 5 years they revisit it and draw the jurisdictional line and setback line. And so depending on what the beach does, they may move the line further back, which you could reclaim that land. Or if erosion continues and the high water mark's right up against the dune, they may bring that line in closer to your house, which means you can only do what OCRM would permit you to do. The second thing is this idea called the public trust doctrine, that our beaches are presumptively owned by the state. And so if that high watermark comes up to where above your current property line is, there's an argument that the state could own that, and that would be something you'd have to litigate and fight with them about. But the city's position on that is if it accretes, you're welcome to try to reclaim it, but you got to go through OCRM and the state to do that.
Thank you. Well, that's it for tonight. I just want to say thank you for everybody for coming out. It clearly shows this is a huge priority for you all as it is for the city. So thank you for the thoughtful questions. I forgot to introduce my right-hand partner, Douglas Carr, our Deputy Administrator, who's been...
Didn't need me.
You all know where to find us at City Hall. I think we've been sharing our email and phone numbers like crazy, just making sure that you all have answers to any questions you may have as we go through this emergency work and as we pursue the work in coordination with the Army Corps. So Jacob, Stephen, Mac, thank you all for coming and spending an hour of your time with us and helping educate us about the beach and what's coming up next. So I appreciate that, and I hope everybody has a great afternoon. I do want to say all the presentations will be available online. We will email it to the property list that we've been building of the property owners along the stretch between Breach and 10th. So you'll get it tomorrow, as well as a video of the meeting, so you have it for your records. All right, thank you all for coming. Have a great evening.